there was a little bit of recording progress. There was a bit of an issue in terms of last week, so I just want to apologize for that. I was in India, and so what happened was I was expecting to join, but to be honest, the signal was really bad where I was, so I just couldn't, couldn't sustain the signal. So rather than having a broken experience, I thought it'd be better that, well, Ricken and I were in communication, and we decided that it was better to just postpone it this week. But there's a lot we want to cover this week. One of the things I asked Ricken to ask all of you to do, and I hope you were able to do it, was to print off the document. Were you able to do that? Oh, excellent. I can see in my hands, Rasa. Heba, just checking. Tiffany, Christina, were you also able to print off the document? There was 2 documents. They're actually like, it's a table. And the reason I've asked that you print it off is because we're going to be using that as part of today's session. Okay. So
I have it in an Excel form, so I will use it that way.
Sorry, could you repeat that, Christina?
I have it in an Excel form now, so I will use it that way.
Okay, that's fantastic. As long as you've got it in a way that's accessible for you, that's the key point. So thank you for sharing that. So what we're going to be looking at today is based upon one of these principles of leadership. And that is that in the book, in this book, Leadership 2, there's a list. B.T. Swami has distilled leadership down to 10 things. And you can find this also on page 18 in your learner guide. And one of the points that he makes about leaders is that they are, let me just find the exact one. Let's see. That's it, number 8. They keep everyone engaged according to their propensities. So one of the things that we wanted to do today is really touch upon this idea of engagement, both current engagement and potential future engagement of the people that we lead. And also we want to use this as an opportunity to look at our own engagement as well. So there's a few discussions we're going to have about that. And specifically, we're going to ask you to do an activity where you're going to be exploring where your team are, excuse me, in regards to their specific capabilities. So in terms of how we're going to do this, maybe I'll share my screen right now, and we can actually start there. So let me just do this. Okay, good, I've got control. Okay, can you see my screen? Yes, okay, great. So let me just set this up to be full screen, and then we can start the session. Hold on 1 second. Display. So, actually, Ricken, did you want to do your normal introduction, or do we go straight in?
You can go ahead and straight in.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, so we're looking at Leadership 2. I know that in the beginning, we always, Ricken would often just take you through a particular recitation, and that's basically offering respects to the spiritual teachers who actually give this particular knowledge. In the Vedic literature, Bhishmadev is also considered to be an authority in what we call Sanatana Dharma, or the highest form of truth. And so the term that's used for people in that category is Mahajan, and there are 12 of them, and they're all considered to be key authorities in understanding the highest truth and how that is applied. So I will just, I'm going to stop my share for a second. I will just say that recite a particular aspect of those prayers just to connect with that lineage of teachers, and we're going to get into the actual activities. Omegyanatamarandasya, Gyananjana Shalakaya Chekshu Ummilitamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. And that's just offering respects to our teachers, especially our teachers of higher consciousness, let's say. Okay, so let's show our slides and let's get into our discussion for today. So let me share my screen again and let's have some discussion on this. I'm also going to encourage you, if you've not yet done so, grab a pen and paper, anything that could be of use to you to make sure that we can get maximum value from our time together. Oh, and I can see Gabrielle has just joined. Gabrielle, welcome, great to see you. And I can see Avni is also connecting, and also Paul. So welcome, Paul. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
Okay, excellent. And I know that Avni's just connecting on audio right now. So let's get into it. Avni will be with us very shortly. So as always, we're taking our source material as the Leadership for an Age of Higher Consciousness 2 book by B.T. Swami. And in the book, it's looking at the conversation between Bhishma Dev and Yudhisthira. Both of them are great warriors, great fighters. And Bhishma Dev is preparing to leave the world. And what's happening is, before he leaves, he's giving direction to Yudhisthira, who is about to become emperor of the entire world. So this is considered to be one of the most pivotal and essential conversations of leadership, because it contains all the defining principles of great leadership. And that's why we're discussing it. As we explained in the previous program with quite a few of you, when we looked at direction, drive, and destiny, we explained that there is two sets of things. There are principles or laws, and then there are details. Many of the books that you read, they have a mixture of some or the other. Some will just focus on one particular detail, which is one particular application or one particular technique. Some will just focus on one or two principles. The understanding here is that because this conversation is taking place with extremely what we call self-realized people, people who have very, very clear perception, clear consciousness, that therefore what they're giving is essential knowledge. Yeah, the fundamental principles that make all leadership work. So we wanted to start here for this week. This is a statement which is a principle given in the literature called the Bhagavatam. It says the root cause of all suffering is ignorance. I want to really draw your attention to this because it's actually a key law of life. You will see, if you look very carefully, in any area of life, the extent to which people are ready to face the reality or the truth is the extent to which they're standing on a firm foundation for success. And this relates to anything. If you want to have a great relationship, you have to know the person you're dealing with, and you have to know yourself. If you're in denial about how they really are, or if you're in denial about what you really need, that one thing is going to cause some kind of issue later on down the line. So, and we did this also in the previous session with many of you. We did, for example, a SWOT analysis. What is a SWOT analysis? A SWOT analysis is just coming into contact with the reality of the situation you're in, right? So what's a SWOT analysis? I want to know what's the truth about my company's strengths. I want to know what's the truth about where my company is not good, right? I don't want to stick my head in the sand and pretend that we're good where we're not, because then I can be taken out by the competition. I want to understand the truth. What are the actual opportunities for my company? And I want to be honest, what are the things, which are the organizations or businesses which can actually cause my company to go down? So you'll see in every area of life, and this is why I love this cell of knowledge. In every area of life, it will give you the most important things to consider. And you'll see this pattern again and again. If you want to be successful in any area of life, you only have to ask yourself one question to begin with. And that is, what am I dealing with? What's actually going on? As long as you actually have that understanding, but just by that one thing alone, your chances of being able to navigate any situation effectively will multiply at least 10 times. And now this is also important. We call this reflexive truth. Reflexive truth means that something is true when you look at it in one way, and when you reverse it, it's also true. So let me explain what I mean by that. When someone is able to see reality, they greatly increase their ability to deal with it effectively, right? Does that make sense, first of all, right? Now, the opposite is also true. Someone who's in denial, okay, that means they're not facing up to reality. They're much, much more likely to run into some major issues in that same area, right? And I think we can all understand this. Let me just pause for a moment. Someone has an issue with their health. and they're not true. They're not facing up to it. They know they have issues. They know that they're having some pains in their body. They know that their energy level is low, or there's got some kind of, you know, some disturbance, some skin rash, or some kind of unusual manifestation in their body, but they're in denial. They're thinking, if I close my eyes and just pretend that it's not there, it will automatically go away. You see, so this is such a key law of life. And I want to encourage you not just to look at this in terms of leadership, but in any area of your life. And I know it's not always easy, because sometimes they're hard truths to face, but I want to encourage you in any area of your life. The first thing you have to do is to be honest about what's going on, you know, to look at what's going on and to face the reality. Yeah. And even if the reality is difficult, if we face it, it will be less difficult than if we're in denial. Yeah. And this point is a point that the Vedas make very, very well. Like I said, the Bhagavatam talks about the root cause of all suffering is ignorance. In the Bhagavatam, when it's talking about ignorance, it's actually talking about ignorance in a very, very broad way. So, for example, it will talk about ignorance of who we truly are. It will talk about ignorance of what will truly make us happy. It will talk about ignorance of what the goal of life is, stuff like that. So it's a higher order, but it's the same idea, you know? And to think about whether it's health, finances, education, learning, staff, you know? Well, therefore we want to always encourage you. The first question is, what's the truth? What's actually going on in this situation, good and bad? And then once I know that, then I can deal with it. And that's the theme for our session today. Because what we're going to do is we're going to do an exercise where we're going to do some analysis of our organizational staff to see the reality of what's going on. And on the basis of reality, then we can start to actually move forward, because you can always improve on something if you know it's not in a good space. But if you think something is in a great position and it's not, then that the reality will catch us up. You see, someone who thinks, okay, I don't need to have any savings, my job is very secure. But let's say you're working in an industry which AI and machine learning are going to completely erode. Okay, let's say you're working in an industry. I have a friend who's an accountant, and the research says that very, very soon there'll be technologies which can do all that number crunching much more efficiently for a fraction of the cost. So someone who's in denial, thinking my job is secure, no, that's not the truth. When that technology is sufficiently widespread, you're going to be made redundant. And unless you're aware of that reality now and start making a plan on that basis, you're going to be stuck, or you're going to be shocked when the reality hits you that actually we're paying you X amount per year, but we can buy a technological package that can get everything done that you're doing and more for literally not 1/10, maybe 100th of the cost of what we're paying you. You see? So this theme of reality, I really want to draw your attention to, because it's so critical. And you can even do this on the other side. You can see in which areas am I not facing the reality, right? Or which people do I know who are in denial about something, right? Because that's where the issue is bound to come up at some point. It may not happen straight away. Sometimes there's a grace period. Someone can be in denial about bad health, but it won't become critical straight away. But over time, it will become more of an issue. You know, there's a famous system for time management, right? So they look at two axes, important, urgent. And so you have some things which are not important and not urgent. You can completely ignore those. You have some things which are urgent, but they're not important. Again, you can ignore those, okay? But the area which is important and not yet urgent, that's the area that we're going to be playing in. We want to see things, when we want to notice things which are important. That means these are things which are essential for us, but we want to see them before it becomes an emergency, isn't it? We want to see things when they are important, but not when they're urgent. And I'm going to throw this out to you first of all. Why is it better to see something and to deal with something when it's important but not urgent, as opposed to important and urgent? Yes, Avni.
So it's preventative, yeah. First
Absolutely.
thing I thought of was health management and preventing illnesses, so forth. That's the first thing I thought of.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rikin, do you want to add something to that, or?
The same point.
Okay. See, and this is interesting. So over many years, I've been exploring and using certain aspects of Ayurveda, which is an ancient system of well-being. And Ayurveda is very much in that field of being preventative, as opposed to being, let's see. So the opposite of preventative is that something where it becomes an intense issue, and now you're having to fix the particular situation. And what they found is it's a much more gentle intervention when you're doing something to maintain something at a good standard than it is when something has completely destroyed itself and now you have to recreate it literally from scratch. You have to rebuild as opposed to maintain, you see? So we want you to also have, and absolutely, Rick, and I know this point, modern day medicine is exactly the opposite. I have a vision for medical well-being and health, that in the future, as our global society becomes more, let's say, more healthy, we will have more emphasis on taking care of things when they start to blip on the radar, when they're not yet a crisis, and that will make a huge difference. And again, because we care about you guys, we're all one team. I want to encourage you. We always like to give stuff that has the widest possible application. Okay, and I repeat that these things that we talk about, they don't just actually apply to leadership. What we're trying to give you are principles of a healthy existence. I did so I have a few mentees around the world, and I did a session for some of them. It's a while ago, and what we got them to look at is health, finance, career. Let's see, what else was there? Spiritual practice. Many of them engage in some kind of meditative practice, etc. We got them to look at 6 different areas and to give a rating in each of these areas. And the rating is basically like a RAG rating. So they're red, amber, green. Okay, so if something's red, it means it's in an emergency space. If something's amber, it's not quite an emergency, but it's starting to blip on the radar. There's some signs that there's something that needs attention. There's something that's not quite right. And if it's green, it means everything's in a good, healthy state. So we got them to look at all 6 areas and to do that analysis. And it was for one simple reason: to make them conscious. There's a natural relationship between seeing reality. It's the same as being conscious. What is it when we say that someone is unconscious? It means that they're not aware, isn't it? By definition, I'm unconscious. You didn't notice something. That means you're unaware. So there's a very powerful principle that we have to become conscious before we can achieve higher consciousness. Okay, we have to be able to be aware of what's actually happening around us and also what's happening within us. And I can personally tell you, honestly, I like to always be very transparent. Just this one thing has transformed my experience of life in so many ways. Just this one thing. And because I'm sensitive to it, I notice when people are conscious and also when they're ignoring something that's actually requiring their awareness and attention. And the pattern, again, that I've seen is when that happens, it always leads to a crisis eventually. Now, I want to also frame this. If people are unconscious of things which are not important, that doesn't matter. What I'm really speaking about is being conscious of key areas of life, right? And when you touched upon some, you can't ignore your health, right? Your health is a foundation for your ability to move around. In the world that we live in, you can't ignore your finances. Imagine, inflation is going up all around the world, correct? Right? Now imagine someone's not aware of that and they're thinking that the savings that they have the same power, the same significance, even though everything else is becoming more expensive. And therefore, because they're not aware, because their understanding of reality is out, therefore their strategies for dealing with things in a healthy way, that also becomes out. It's a misalignment. In other words, the quality of your strategy or actions is based upon the quality of our ability to face the truth. If I see something and I acknowledge what's going on, then my strategy to deal with it is going to deal with the reality. It's going to be effective. But if I'm out of touch with reality, whatever I'm doing is not going to address the real issues that need to be addressed. Okay, so that's like a precursor. So back to our slides. The root cause of all suffering is ignorance. Now, in a previous session, we shared this model with you. This is actually a model that I used on the recent TED Talk, although it probably will come out either towards the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So there's a Sanskrit framework. I'll give you the Sanskrit wording, and then I'll explain my my reframing of it. It's called Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. There's a literature called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And in that literature, a personality is actually an incarnation. It's called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says that everything could be understood through this framework. And it's so true. I've tried to use and apply this and see. Direction means your sambandha. It means your understanding of the reality that you're dealing with. Anyone who understands the reality that they're dealing with properly will from that understanding, you'll be able to get direction. Just like, for example, I want to get to India. Okay. First of all, if I analyze properly, if I understand the situation, I can understand I'm in London. London is at least 9 hours flight to India. Therefore, to get there, I've got to pay for my fare. I've got to go from one of these airports. I've got to go on a particular flight. It'll take me this long to get there. My understanding the situation I'm in, I can then have a proper sense of my direction. Next thing is Abhideya. Abhideya means the activity. So activity is basically your action, your drive, your endeavor, your ability to move forward and do something. And of course, when you engage in drive or activity and it's done with the right direction or strategy, that those two things together are like a formula. If I've got the right direction and the right drive or activity, that's how I'm going to get to my goal. And my goal means my destination. There's often activities that we do with leaders, and sometimes what we'll do is we'll do a group activity and we'll give them a particular task to do. Invariably, all the leaders who are successful, all the teams, who are successful in achieving that task, one of the things that they all have in common, whenever we do this, is that they had a good sense of strategy. They took some time to work out, what should I be doing? Direction. You see, many people, they skip what they should be doing and they just jump into something that they want to do. They're not strategic. So there's lots of effort, lots of activity, but it doesn't give them the outcome that they could get. So, you know, there's a terminology that people often use. They say, work smart. This model covers that. What does it mean to work smart? It means you've got direction plus drive. You've got strategy plus endeavor. Yeah. That's what it means to work smart. If I just work, that's just drive on its own. If I just strategize, but I don't execute, that's just direction on its own. But when I've got the right strategy, plus the drive to execute on that strategy, then my results will be optimized. Yeah, that's how this model actually works. Let's move on. So most people and most self-help does this. They try to turn ideas into reality. And there's a place for that. I'm not knocking that. What we've been trying to share with you over these weeks is the following. What we're doing is we're helping you to understand the reality and to turn that into ideas that you can actually apply. Okay, so what's the truth? That's where we start. We start with reality and then action. So let's go to this. The two documents I asked you to print off. So I'll explain what this document is and how we're going to use it. Then we're going to give you some quality time to fill this in. So what we've done here is we've created for you, I'm going to switch this off in a moment so I can just talk to you. we've created a heat map. Along the side, you have some specific leadership characteristics. And I'll explain where I got these from. On a few sessions ago, we talked about Project Aristotle, which was the project run by Google looking at the characteristics of high-performing teams. Now, Google did another project, and in that project, they were looking at the characteristics of high-performing managers. So what I put in the first heat map along the side are the characteristics of high-performing managers or leaders according to the research that was done by Google. Okay, so high-performing managers, they were found to be people who were good at coaching people. So that's the first one. That they were good at empowering other people, empowering teams. They were results-oriented. They were able to focus on the outcomes they wanted to achieve. They were good communicators. They also took the time to invest in helping people to develop their careers. They had a clear sense of vision and strategy. Where necessary, because again, it depends on the particular industry or business, they had the key technical skills which were needed. They were good at collaborating and they were good at making decisions. Okay, so what I've done in the heat map is I put those along the side, and the first individual I put in the column along the top, which is people in your team. It starts with you. Okay, so what I've also done, if you look at the top of the screen, if you look at the top of your sheet, I've got rate 0 minimum to 5 maximum. So that's our key. What I'm going to ask you to do is to start to, and I'm going to show you an example. I'm going to ask you to start to fill in this particular heat map. I'll give you an example here. So I was just playing around with these numbers. So for example, if I'm evaluating a person, I may find that in terms of coaching, maybe they've got very little experience. So in terms of coaching, they're a 1. So it's close to minimum, right? And empowering team, they're not very good at that. They're a 1. But it could be incredibly good at being focused on results. So they are a number 5. They may have good communication skills, number 5. Now, they may not be so good at actually developing careers. So then, although actually they may be good, but not brilliant, but good, right? So they're 4, near a 5. They may have excellent strategic thinking and visioning. Technical skills may be somewhere in the middle. Collaboration may not be so strong, and they may not be such a strong decision maker. Okay, whatever it is. The idea is that I'm going to go through both myself and at least a few members of my team. And I would suggest, if you've got big teams, choose the most important individuals in that space, person A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? And put their initials or names down, and then complete the entire heat map, giving a rating between 0 to 5 for each person in relation to those characteristics, okay? And we're going to use this in order to understand the reality of the team that we're dealing with and the skills that we need for success. So let me pause for a moment and ask, are there any questions on the activity that we're asking you to do first of all? Is that quite clear? Yeah? Okay. Now, I want to negotiate with you about the timing for this, because we want this to be done in a quality way. So I'm thinking, would 10 minutes be okay? Is it too little? Is it too much? How long do you think you will need to do a good analysis in terms of pulling those numbers in, but in a thoughtful way? Any thoughts on that? Will 10 minutes be okay? Yeah, okay. Tiffany, what do you think? Christina, okay. Is 10 minutes enough? Okay. So what we're going to do then is I'm going to pause for 10 minutes. And in those 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you just the first sheet. We asked you to print out 2, but just the first one, which already has the column at the side completed. Choose those individuals. And remember, you're the first one where it says me. We're talking about you as a manager. And again, the key thing here is to be as honest as possible. That's why I talked about the principle of reality, because if I know the truth of what's going on, then I can deal with it most effectively. If I'm in denial, I will always run into problems at some later time. Okay? Okay. Any questions before we start the 10 minutes? Okay. What I'm going to ask you to do while you're doing this, I'm going to ask you to switch your cameras off. And then after 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you to switch your camera back on to let me know you're back in the room. And then we're going to go to another stage in the analysis. So 10 minutes, do this conscientiously. Think about it very carefully. For example, when you're doing this and you're giving someone a rating, including yourself, just try to be mindful. Where does that rating come from? What have I seen, heard, or experienced that makes me think this person is a number 5 in this area, or a number 1 in this area, or a number 2 in this area? Okay, so we'll give you 10 minutes with your cameras off, and we'll reconvene in exactly 10 minutes time. Thank you.
What does, sorry, very quickly, what does career development mean? What do you mean by that?
So when Google was doing this research, career development, they found that the high-performing managers were invested in helping the people that they lead to develop their career. Now, what I can add to that is when you're pulling in other members of the team, you can also look at when you're evaluating them in this area, you may want to think about how much they take ownership of their own career development and how good they are at actually moving that career development forward, whether it's because they're taking courses that can allow them to develop, whether they're aligning their day-to-day work in a way that helps them to progress in their career, whatever it is. Does that answer your question, Avni? Okay, so 10 minutes, we'll reconvene. So I know that, so Paul, I know you need to leave soon. So thank you for that. So feel free to leave whenever you need to go. But all I want to do is throw this out to everyone. How did you find the activity, and what were your discussion points? What were you taking away or looking at?
I'm going to go first just because I have to leave first. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I got to meet and chat Mohit and Asa, and truly phenomenal people. We did some great sharing. Ed, Ricken, thank you so much for leading this. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. And I love being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
We love
to see
having you here as well.
Thanks.
Take care. Okay. Anyone else? I'd love to hear what were your reflections, what were your discussions, and what were your experiences based upon doing this particular activity? No one had any. Okay, yes, Tiffany, please. Yes.
So for me, this was great. And Christine and I were talking, you know, I'm a family doctor, I'm in an office. And at the moment, I don't have control over my colleagues, right? You know, we're physicians. But right now, our office is going through big change. Actually, tonight, there's going to be an announcement. There's a huge merger happening of 2 big healthcare companies. But what really got to me is because I went through, you know, I thought about where I am on each of these levels. And the first thing that came to me is that I only rank myself a number 1 on a clear vision and strategy. But and Christine and I, as we spoke, like I didn't rank my team members because I don't really have them in that sense. But I realized at the end of the day, you know, one of my greatest frustrations was that, you know, I was kind of blaming the office is very, if I can say, it's toxic now, no one's happy. I've brought up ideas, no one wants to go with them. And then I've been staying silent, you know, but I realized that this is all, you know, festering underneath the surface. But if I really want to follow my vision and a strategy, then I have to go above and beyond, you know, where I'm at. And I think because we kind of talked about that, like, what if you're, you know, in an environment where you feel blocked? If you're blocked, and if there is no room for growth in that environment, we can still hit the doors. We can still, like, I go to meetings and I have compassion and I feel this and everything in my heart, but there's sometimes I think we have to expand. And so for me, like what I said, I'm getting very frustrated. And this was the point. The frustration was not so as much as with the office, it was with me, because I didn't follow my vision when I joined this company a year ago. I allowed myself to be confined within the walls. And now I'm like, oh, I don't like this because it's on me. And so now I have to think, how can I grow and expand? And actually the idea we came up with is that with this merger, I have to let people know who I am and what ideas I have, because I've stayed small in this little bubble, but now I've got 2 big companies coming together, and I want them to know that I'm interested. I have ideas for growth. And so I have to make that transition myself.
That's such a powerful sharing. This is why we do this. We're learning from each other. You've inspired me, Tiffany. What I will do, we'll see where we're going to fit this in. I will do a dedicated session with all of you on influence. There's a whole range of research on how you can wield influence, because sometimes we have very, very good people with great ideas and it's not being accepted or taken on board. But actually, there's certain things that we can do on it. So I'll construct something. I'm not sure if it will be next week, but we'll work out when we pull it into the program, and we'll link it to what BT Swami is saying, because I know he was an expert in that area. Thank you for that inspiration, Tiffany. Who else? Who else would like to share? Anyone?
All right, and we'll share. So we spent time with Paul, and it was really neat because our personalities the way they are, you know, we really tried to understand Paul's organization and really dove into like how we can help him and things like that. But my biggest takeaway, as it relates to this matrix, it was nice to talk about it, but you know, I started focusing on what you were saying is this is powerful for me, is assessing your situation. The truthfulness gives you the direction. And then direction then obviously leads to activity and the drive and activity that leads to your destination. So one of the things that's literally what's missing for some of our people on my team, which is not assessing truthfulness of where we're at. And we got into a conversation regarding how that's human nature, that we overvalue ourselves always, because you can see mine are a lot of fives here, and not so much for my team. And so I think that not wanting to face that truth, what we don't sometimes see that clearly all the way through, is really hinders us long term. So short terms, it gives us the the attaboy that we're looking for, but long term, it's really hurting us. So it's a self detrimental type of thinking. So that's what we came away with, is not understanding the true situation really leads to some of these points that makes effective management.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I'll just add to that. One of the things we often get managers to do is, okay, you've evaluated yourself and your team. It's always a very, very interesting exercise to see, would your team rate themselves in the same way? Would your team rate each other in the same way? And would they rate you as their manager in the same way that you rate yourself? And to your point, sometimes people can also, you have some people who overrate themselves. You have a lot of people who do that, but you also have some people who underestimate their abilities. You have some people who it's very, very interesting. You have some people, they're great at something, but the way they come across is as being very competent. If you ask them, they'll think, I'm not very good at that. And it's like, are you kidding me? You're brilliant at that. So there's both things going on. And that's why the research says our self-image is actually a conglomerate of how we see ourselves and the feedback that we receive from the environment. And what we're looking for is we're looking to refine that self-image to make it accurate, to, again, the same principle, to make it realistic. I was speaking to one person yesterday and they were upset with someone. And as we got talking, I said to them, look, yes, I understand. Well, and this is a mistake I've made myself, is that what we want to do is we want to look objectively at what was done. Because what happens usually is it's like a formula. I have my sensitivity plus what you've done equals my response. So my response may be inappropriate. It may be too much, but it's too much because I'm not actually taking into account just what you've done. I'm also taking into account that I already had a wound in that particular area. You touched on a wound. That's why something that you said that may have even been a joke, I've responded to it to a very high extent, you see? But what we want to do is heal that wound so that when I'm responding to you appropriately just on what you said. Not what you said plus the way I was hurt in the past by someone else. No, that's healed now. So when you say something, I'm responding to just what you said. But it takes, again, humility and honesty to see, I've got a wound here already. That's why I over-respond when someone does something of this nature or that nature. You see, it's again, recognizing reality, and I've seen it again and again. To the extent that we do this, everything goes much better in life. Again, the Bhagavatam, the root cause of all suffering is ignorance. And what you can do, I've done this as an exercise, you can just look to see in any area where a person is in denial, that's where you'll see issues arise. Guaranteed, right? If they're in denial, they're not facing the reality of what's going on, it will catch up with them in the long term, especially. Reality always catches up with people in the long term. We're able to deny it in the short term, occasionally even up to midterm, but no one can deny the reality in the long term. You have two people in a relationship, but they're completely incompatible. They can get away with that in the short term, but not in the long term, because in the long term, everything trends towards the reality. That's the power of it. There's a lot there. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mohit. Who else would like to share? Christina or Gabrielle, is there anything that you want to share? Rasa, is there anything you wanted to share? Ricken, is there anything you wanted to share? Everyone's quiet today. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Ricken, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I'll just share that this exercise really, what it does is what I like about the exercise is that, you know, Google's Aristotle project, it touches upon a lot of the principles that are in this book. And, you know, there's a lot of overlaps. So I like how this exercise just practically kind of just allows us to kind of integrate and bring in a lot of the principles we've been discussing over time. And I think the question always becomes, we can rate ourselves. I think what would be also interesting to discuss at some point is not only how do we, you know, in the different categories, how do we move ourselves forward, you know, to progress in these things, but also moving individuals forward in different areas obviously requires a more specific, tailored kind of approach. But I'd be interested in just hearing people's thoughts on how they move people forward in these different categories as well. So, but I really like the exercise from that perspective of just what we've covered and how it's getting us to, you know, just look at ourselves. And again, just this element of looking at truth, where I think it's a lot easier sometimes. We talk about this all the time. It's a lot easier sometimes to just start acting without reflecting first, right? Yeah. And that I think years ago you told me, like, for 1 minute of planning, we save 7 or 8 minutes, right?
Absolutely, I've seen it. In fact, you know, we all know the famous saying, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. Yeah, and that's what a good plan is. A good plan is a recognition. A good plan is the offshoot of a recognition of a reality in a situation. And if we as a global society, if we weren't in denial, if we were willing to face the truth of something, you would see across the world in practically all industries, all arenas of social and personal life, everything would improve just by that one thing. That's why sometimes people who want to control a narrative and control activities, they always start by trying to control the media. Because if you can control the narrative of what people understand to be the reality, then you can control everything else off the back of it. It's all done on the basis of what people believe to be true. And that happens on a collective level, it happens on an individual level as well. Yeah, that's why it's so foundational. Thank you for that comment, Ricken. Anyone else?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So just reflecting back from, you know, some previous conversations. So you brought up the Sanskrit word sambandha in terms of, you know, in this framework being about, you know, good direction or strategy. Mm-hmm. But you brought up the same word in the previous session in terms of being, you know, about good relationships or connectivity. So yes. Could you tie the two together, just from the standpoint of strategy and relationships, and how, you know, how this is, because I feel like it's a little bit of, you know, gray in that sense.
Absolutely. So first of all, it's a brilliant question. I was thinking about this and I was trying to think about how to share this. It's a brilliant question. So I'll explain how this works. So in the Vedic literatures, the term is sambandha. Sometimes it's said sambandha gyan. Okay. So the way that that's often translated is literally gyan means knowledge. So sambandha gyan means the knowledge of relationships. So what's meant to happen is this. What is a strategy? A strategy is, first of all, based upon the reality. So reality is never just what things are going on. It's the relationship between the things which are going on. For example, let's say the reality is my health is good, I've got resources, I've got the right connections or network. So I've got all these different things going on in the reality. Now, what actually good strategy does is it's looking at the relationship between those things. If you've got a good network and you've got resources and you're capable, then what you're actually talking about as a strategy, the strategy is, because I can see the relationship between these things, it helps me to understand what's possible. You see? So Sambandha, or understanding the field of activities, it leads to direction because you see what's in your life space. And by seeing the relationship between those different things, you see the potential as to where you can go. Okay? That's actually how it relates. So it's not just what's going on in your field. You know, okay, you're well educated, you've got a great network of supportive people, you've got your greater ideation, but it's the relationship between all those things which helps you to figure out, if I've got all these things, then bringing them all together, I could achieve this. Yeah. So it's not just what you have, it's how they relate to each other. When I did this TED Talk, I began the TED Talk by explaining that Aristotle says that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I explained, but what does that mean? Because why would the whole be great? Like now, right? So it's Rikin, Gabrielle, Mohit, Rasa, Tiffany, Vienna. I'm sorry, Christina. So 2, 4, 6, 7 people. All of us are individually productive. Why would the whole of, why would us working together be greater than each person's individual contribution? It's because of the relationship we have with each other. If we have a good relationship with each other and everyone offers what they can offer, it's complemented by everyone else. One of you may be brilliant at marketing, okay? Someone else may be brilliant at producing great content, but they're not good at marketing. But because you're good at marketing, now that great content can make $1 million because the person who's good at marketing can take the great content and amplify it to 1 million customers. See? But the person who's good at marketing by themselves, they've got no content. So that's not very valuable. The person who's got great content can't market it to people, not very valuable. But the two coming together, suddenly something else becomes available that each person could not do by themselves. So does that help to explain a bit more, Rasa? So it's all the field of activity. When we're trying to create good strategy, we want to understand the reality, but the reality isn't just what's in the reality. The reality is the things which we've got going on in our space and their relationships with each other. I got this from a literature called the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the things it explains is that there are 5 themes, and I found some amazing stuff, which maybe I'll go into this in another session, but I'll just touch upon it now. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says that there's 5 themes, and I'll give you the Sanskrit. It says Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, Karma, and Prakriti. So those 5 themes in the Bhagavad Gita, they're a principle. They're 5 principles. In other words, in any area of your life, if you look at these 5 things and how they relate to each other, you understand exactly what's going on. I'll get into that. I'll unpack that in another session. But Ishvara means the control. So you're looking at who's got the power or the control. Like Tiffany, for example, when you spoke about trying to move some things forward in your current environment, one of the key points about influence is you want to go to the people who are the influencers, who are the power brokers, the ones who have the ability to make decisions to make things happen. When I was working in one company, one of the things that we would talk about is that when you want to influence an organization, you go to who controls the budget. Because if you go to other people and they love your idea, but the person who's controlling the purse strings doesn't, they won't spend any money to make your idea a reality. You see, so strategically, Ishvara, who's got the power? Then it's Jiva, so that's you, right? And the other people. So who am I? What are my strengths, capabilities? Who are the other people? Ishvara, Jiva. Prakriti. Prakriti means the resources, it's the material, right? Prakriti means do we have money? Do we have resources? Do we have time? Do we have energy, etc.? So Prakriti. So color is time, actually. That's deadlines, capacity, color, time. And then karma is activities, right? So what's going on? What's the company presently doing? Where am I presently putting my activity, my energy? And so understanding who's the authority, who am I, right? And other people, what's the timelines we have to work with? What are the resources that we have? And what are the deadlines? Yeah, so what are the activities, karma? Understanding these 5 things in any situation can help you build a healthy strategy, because these 5 things are the 5 key things to understand when you're trying to understand the reality of any situation. Yeah, anyway, we'll elaborate on that on another occasion. Yeah, I think we're at time, actually. So is that the case? People, I think, need to leave soon. Okay, so yeah, what we'll do is we're going to continue on this heat map. That's why I asked you to print out 2. When we come to next week's session, this first session was looking at leadership activities. The next session, I want you to think about your organization. Aside from leadership activities, what capabilities do you need for the success of your organization today and tomorrow? And when we come next week, we're going to figure out what those capabilities are. We're going to put those into that side column, and then we're going to do an analysis, but based upon our own capabilities. Because this week we gave you some. Next week, we want to make it more tailored to your own specific organization or project. It could be a project that I'm involved in. And if my project is to be successful, I need people who are good with technology. I need people who have good ability to build rapport and relationships. I need people who are great at presentation skills. I need people who are able to think innovatively. I need people who are strong in organization. I need people who are great event managers. Whatever it is, we're going to ask you to brainstorm and choose your own set of capabilities, and then do an analysis. And then we're going to spend more time, as Rikin said, looking at how we bring people up, not just who needs to be brought up, not just what we're seeing, but how practically we're going to move the needle in the right direction. Okay. Thank you so much. It's always a great pleasure being with all of you. I hope it was of some use. And again, please do not forget this underlying principle, this idea that the root cause of all suffering is ignorance. That's from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And what it says in there is that if we're ignorant about who we are and what we need to be truly happy, then no matter how much activity we do, we'll still feel something's lacking. You see? And that's the whole orientation of the Bhagavatam, that actually we're not the body, we're more than the body. We have an inner dimension, and therefore, along with taking care of the body, the mind, the intelligence, if we also do something for that inner dimension, then and only then do we get the full spectrum of fulfillment and joy and progress in our lives. Okay, thank you very much for your time. We hope that you have a great weekend, a great week, and we're very excited to see you and continue this discussion next week.